Welcome all to the Pro Football Radio Podcast. We are back with another episode 57. This is your co-host, Jay Cheema, with the pride and joy of Merrimack, New Hampshire. The Puma.
It feels good to hear those words again. It's been almost 2 months to the day since we recorded an episode, and yeah, it's good to be back, Jay. It's good to be back. How you doing?
It's good to be back, my man. It's been a while. Usually we don't like to take so much time off between episodes, but we had quite a bit going on. Before we start the podcast, man, I want to dedicate this podcast to my buddy Nicholas Porter. He tragically passed away August 1st. One of the main reasons we've been away for so long. But he was a great dude, man. He was not just my roommate or a friend, but he was more like a brother, almost somebody I considered family. Just a great dude, man. He'll be missed, and this one's for you, buddy.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This is for you, Nick.
Yeah. Okay, so like Puma said, we are back. To give you guys a quick rundown of what this podcast is going to be all about. As usual, we'll just bullshit and, have some laughs real quick. We'll jump right into a few storylines we're monitoring during the training camp. One being the James Blake shooting up in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and how it affects the NFL. Another being the Patriots camp update and how the quarterbacks are dueling it out between Cam Newton and Jarrett Stidham. We're also going to touch base on the Miami Dolphins camp updates. And then finally, we're going to round it out with the Washington football team and the myriad of stories coming out of that camp, whether it's Ron Rivera's diagnosis or the latest WAPO articles, Washington Post. It seems like the Washington football team in itself is just the NFL with all these storylines coming out.
Oh, for sure. Like the Washington football team has been on a roller coaster of emotions and stories basically since Ron Rivera took over the job. So it's going to be interesting to see. We'll definitely get into a little bit more when we get to that portion of the podcast. But yeah, interesting stuff coming out of the district.
Yes, sir. But besides that, man, how you been? How's life on your end? You guys doing good over there?
Oh, God, doing all right. Life's in flux right now because the fiance, the kiddo, and myself, I guess we're all a family at this point. I don't know why I had to break it down individually.
Yeah, you can just be like, hey, my fam, you
Yeah,
gotta
no
like,
shit.
you don't gotta put labels on it.
Ride.
Is that how you feel?
Just here for the ride. No. So we're in flux right now. We're in the process of moving. We're going to be moving in about I think a week. We close next Friday, and then Saturday is moving day. And drafted yourself to help us move. And I'm sitting in a dining room surrounded by U-Haul boxes. And Jay, I friggin' hate packing, man. And today was the day of days of trying to pack shit, and we have to get some stuff fixed around the house. So it was on the phone trying to find people to fix a couple of storm doors and the infamous garage door that's been busted for 2 months now. Just craziness the last couple of days around here. But all is well at Hacienda de Meadow Street.
Listen, if there was, and I echo your sentiment, I absolutely hate moving. Without a doubt, I hate moving. It's one of the worst things on the planet. If you were to give me a choice between, hey, you got to move your little stuff, and I don't have a lot of stuff. I mean, I'm just by myself, I only have one couch. I'm you helped me move before. It's not that much, right?
Yeah.
If the choice was given to me, if I had to either move myself or if I could spend a weekend in jail, I'll take the weekend in jail and have somebody do it for me. You know what I'm saying? With the stipulation of me spending that time in jail, somebody would do it for me. I would gladly take the second option instead of moving, man.
Oh, for sure. I don't know about going inside, but I definitely would get a root canal done without anesthesia over packing. It's such a pain, and it's hard to pack the house when we're still using a majority of stuff in the house. Last week we were trying to pack the kitchen, and I was like, what the hell am I packing? We still use half of the stuff. Are we just gonna eat takeout for 2 weeks? Because at that rate, I mean, I've already put on the COVID-19 pounds, the COVID-19 weightage. Now I'm just gonna be looking. Next time Jay comes by the house and sees me, I'm gonna be looking like Fat Albert. I might have to get a construction crew to knock down a few walls in order for me to go to work if we're just gonna pack everything and eat takeout all day. So no, I hate packing. I can't do it. But the finish line is in sight, Jay. got most of the stuff packed. Just gotta get the kiddo stuff packed, and then life will be good. And I gotta get a friggin' U-Haul, and we'll call that the end of the day. Actually, I gotta rent a U-Haul. Thank you. I gotta remind myself to place an order for a U-Haul. So this is fine.
There you go. This is what we do on this podcast. We talk sports, and I remind you things to do, man. It is what
Yep.
it is, you know.
Yep.
The audience is listening and just taking it all in right now.
Yeah, they're gonna hit me up on Twitter at Brando_Puma and be like, hey Puma, did you get the U-Haul? I'll be like, no, that's why I'm living in a cardboard box outside of the house that my the rest of the family's living in.
But you're right, man. This whole like moving thing, and I'm sure COVID-19 makes it harder. But did I tell you about my little COVID-19 scare that I had this week?
No, you didn't. Tell me.
So I roll up.
People that happened to it would be you, Jay.
I tell you what, the crazy shit happens to me. But I roll up to work yesterday, which is Thursday, and every single day before you can enter the building, they give you a questionnaire, and the questionnaire is how do you feel today? Do you have these symptoms? Blah blah. They take your temperature and they monitor all this shit, right? Now they've been taking my temperature for the last 4 months, and they've been making me making me do this little questionnaire before I enter the building. On this day, my temperature was about 1.5 degrees above the 97 point whatever it was, right?
Oh.
And then on top of that, I had a sore throat, right?
Oh.
Now, when I mentioned that, the 5 alarms went off in the building. Everybody lost their shit. They're like, "You gotta go take a test right now!"
We got a code black.
I know,
code
right?
black.
Dude,
Jay's got the COVID.
It was insane. It was Jay's got the COVID, so it's you can't come in here. So I had to go. Well, let me back up real quick because I think it was not just that, right? So this past weekend, I actually traveled to Chicago, Illinois, to see some family, and Chicago in itself is a high-risk state. So if you do come back from Chicago to Connecticut, you're supposed to self-quarantine and all that bullshit. But the fact that I traveled to Chicago and my company knew about it, and the fact that I had a little bit of a symptom, I kind of see the logic now. You know what I'm saying? It kind of makes sense for me to go and get my little COVID test. But essentially, I show up to this little place in Danbury called Docs Urgent, and on the website it says urgent care. Come in whenever you can. No appointment needed. It's one of those things. Will be a rapid testing. You'll be in about 30 minutes.
Yeah,
Guess how much time I spent? I got there at 10 o'clock in the morning. Guess what time I left with my COVID-19 results?
Oh, let's see. I'll set the over under at 1.5 hours. I'm going to take the over. I'll say you were probably there 2 hours and 15 minutes.
6 hours.
You were there for 6 hours?
6 hours. It was absolutely insane. It was absolutely insane. I spent so much time there. And, it was not just the fact that they were busy, it was just a complete incompetence of that facility. I actually wrote them a very strongly worded review. I was just like, this is the most incompetence I've ever seen, blah, blah, lack of organizational skills. I
was the place
shreds,
busy? 6 hours?
I mean, it was busy, but it was not as busy as, listen, it takes 2 seconds to do these tests, right? I went back there to get my COVID-19 test. They stuck a little nose thing in my nose. It took 30 minutes after that. But it was just the paperwork beforehand and the waiting and the bullshit and the disorganization that really caused all the issues, man.
Jesus.
I know.
So how did it feel to get a stick shoved up your nose? Were they was it telling you what you were thinking? Was it picking your brain literally? How did that work?
Listen, it was not that bad at all. People make it out to be a really daunting issue, and it's I've heard horror stories over it, but I thought it was not that bad at all, man. It was 2 seconds on each nostril, and I was done. I literally sat down, and between me chit chatting with the nurse for 5 minutes. The whole procedure itself took, I would say, 15 seconds max from the time she undid the little tool they use.
Wow.
Yeah.
6 hours of paperwork.
I know.
Tara would have killed somebody. She hates paperwork with the passion of 1,000 suns. I was thinking, when you called me, I was like, oh, it shouldn't be that bad. Maybe it's the drive-through kind of deal. You just sit in your car, that you stick your head out, they'll do the thing. I didn't know you were waiting inside for 6 hours. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was interesting week to say the least, and that was not even the highlight of my week. The highlight
Oh,
of my week,
oh, what's the highlight of the week,
the
Jay?
highlight of my week was Tuesday night, man. Like it's been a crazy week, man. No lie. But the highlight of my week, man, and this is the last story we'll get to. People will get to football, I promise. But Tuesday night, man, I get back home from work, right? I like, I get into my gym clothes. I'm ready to go, right? And I get into my car, I get down to my driveway, I get out, and I go to my mailbox to pick up the mail. And as I'm walking from the mailbox back to my car, like a cop car goes by, and I don't think much of it, right? I'm like, a cop car just zooming by, it is what it is. So I get back in my car and I start driving, and all of a sudden I see this cop car turn around and get right up on my ass, right? And you can see in the rearview mirror he's actually on the radio with somebody talking to somebody, and he's actually like putting my license plate into his little computer he has.
Yeah.
And as I go down the street, I'm thinking, all right, well, this guy's probably just tailing me. It'll be fine. As I get down the street, about another, I would say 3 minutes down the street, another a mile and a half, all of a sudden, like his boys show up and like five cop cars fucking box me in, bro. Like
What?
it was something out of the movies, man. It was absolutely insane. Like they boxed me in, they're on the loudspeaker, they're like, pull over, and I'm like, I'm trying,
Oh my God.
So they're telling me to pull over, right? And like these two female cops roll up, and they're like, start giving third degree, who are you, where you from, what are you doing? And I'm like, god damn, like, aren't you gonna ask me for my license and insurance?
Yeah.
And eventually we got to the point where I gave them my license and my insurance, and they kind of ran the checks, and everything came back obviously clean, there was no issues. And but apparently what happened was there was a call, this is what they said, there was a call from one of the neighbors that said there was a suspicious male in the area wearing a black t-shirt, and I happened to be wearing.
That's super descriptive
I know,
in the
right?
middle of nowhere of Southbury. Literally, for those of you that don't know where Jay lives in Southbury, and it's kind of off the beaten path, right, Jay? Like you
Yeah,
really
yeah,
have to go out of your way to find this part of town that you live in.
yeah, yeah. And apparently, they got that, report of a suspicious male with a black t-shirt, and I happen to be wearing that black t-shirt, right? And, essentially, after they found out it wasn't me and I wasn't their guy, they're fairly courteous. I'm not going to bash somebody, just because I want to bash them. They're very courteous, very nice. They told me what the story was, and they said, you're on your way. I don't think much of it, man. And truthfully, at the end of the day, obviously, the reason why I bring it up is because I ran the story by one of my friends, Warren, and obviously he's
Yep.
black, right? And he
Yep.
sees it through a different lens than I do, right? He thinks that this is racial profiling 101. Obviously, I am of a Pakistani descent. My middle name is Mohammed. Like, I'm Pakistani American, but you can definitely tell, it could be from somewhere else. So, I ran this story by him, and he's 100% convinced that I was racially profiled. And the cop that drove by the street when I was picking up my mail, he saw you, he thought you were out of place, and he wanted to pull you over. And that line they fed you was bullshit at the end. So listen, I'm not gonna make something out of nothing. I really don't know what happened. I'm not gonna pretend like I do know, but I ran it through somebody that I thought would have a better explanation, and that's what he thinks.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No. I mean, dude, it doesn't make any goddamn sense. You really have to go out of your way to get. I don't know, man. It's 2020. All bets are off, dude. Like all bets are off. Nothing is stopping anybody from just calling the cops randomly on some person, just for the hell of it. At this point, that's the way it works. I didn't realize it was like SWAT the movie
Dude, it
coming to
was
get you.
insane.
And it's like you would have thought, like, okay, they run your plates. Like, I mean, as far as I know, you don't have any open warrants, Jay.
No, obviously I'm
So,
sitting here without any
you
issues,
know what
bro.
I mean? So it's like, okay, we're really gonna have like 5 cop cars show up because a random male in a black T-shirt was spotted somewhere in Southbury. That's so. You know what? This is the one time I'm gonna agree with you and Warren in regards to nonsense like
Now,
this.
Brandon,
The state
now,
of the
Brandon,
state of the world.
I will say, like I said earlier in my story, like I did not feel at all, an issue, because once they found out who I was, it was cool. But I still say, man, and I know you guys joked about this back when I worked at Tradewin, that time I got pulled over in Oxford by the cops in Oxford, Connecticut, I felt uneasy, man. The guy had his hand on his gun the whole fucking time. And obviously, looking back on it now, with the different information that we have about cops, this is about 3 years ago. It kind of makes a little more sense. Like I had no issues here at all. Like when they cleared me, it was cool. I was good to go. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I mean, it is kind of a microcosm of what's happening in the world right now in the world of sports, and it kind of leads into our first topic. And unfortunately, it's another week, and another unarmed black man is shot by the police, and this time it's in Kenosha, Wisconsin. James Blake was shot 7 times in the back, and he's paralyzed from the waist down. And the reason why I bring this up is because this has led to quite a bit of outcry and protest in the sports world. Actually, I'll take it back. Not even protest, it's boycotting essentially, right?
Yeah.
Essentially, everything shut down, starting with the Milwaukee Bucks, who were the domino that made it fell. After the Bucks, boycotted because it is in their home state that this shooting happened. The whole NBA shut down, and then MLB shut down some games, and then NHL shut down games, and then the NFL shut down, practices. And the reason why I bring this up is because, it's one thing to discuss these issues, but it's also to bring it back towards football. And this is why you guys come to us. The question that I want to pose to you is, man, with everything that's happened and with all the boycotting, do you expect this year to see some sort of protest or some sort of sitting out a game or boycotting a game because of the social injustice in this country?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, from the New York Giants, I think it was Saquon Barkley and the wide receiver Sterling Shepard. I mean, they both came out basically right after the Milwaukee Bucks and the NBA boycotted the playoff games. They said they're willing to do the same thing in the NFL at some point this season. It's not just those two guys. You could go back on Twitter Monday evening, and you could just find tweets from Tyrann Mathieu and the NFL Players Association, the union, and a couple other players basically saying like this needs to stop. Like we're in lockstep with like what the Milwaukee Bucks are trying to do, and I fully expect that to happen. It's definitely not beyond it's definitely within the realm of possibility that there could be players willing to sit out games. And what do you, from the NFL perspective, like what happens if a whole team decides to sit out? Like, is that team going to forfeit? Because the NBA, I think technically, if they wanted to, they could have said the Milwaukee Bucks were going to forfeit the game, but they had the wherewithal to not do that. But like, it's so hard to reschedule games in an NFL calendar with all the travel and accommodations for like 80 people traveling at once. Like what are they going to do? Are they just going to move it a day? Are they going to move it to a whole other week in the schedule? It's definitely something to keep an eye on, and it's going to be fun watching football this year with all the people out there that saying, stick to sports, don't talk about politics. Well, when you got players, especially in the fantasy football world of things, when say you have Saquon Barkley and he sits out a game, yeah, what are you going to talk about then? Like nobody's really going to give a shit about your fantasy team. It's going to drive the conversation, and especially with how gambling is involved in things, not to put a monetary value on this, but every action that these players are doing, and don't get it twisted, I'm for the players and everything that they're doing right now, is going to have a dollar sign consequence to everything that they're doing.
Yeah, and you bring up a couple of good points, man. And I'll start off by saying this. I think the NFL itself, the leadership, the owners, and the commissioner need to be talking right now and meeting right now and figuring out what kind of game plan they're going to have for a team boycotting or sitting out. Because I'm in the camp of it's not, if it's going to happen or when it's going to happen. I mean, I think it's definitely going to happen. You just got to kind of, you're going to kind of have to, figure out what the schedule is going to play out. And I think this is the one time that the COVID might actually have a positive effect. Why not just use the COVID schedule they've built in for the flexibility? Why not just use that for a social injustice boycott or whatever they want to call it? I think the schedule is already there with the COVID and the flexibility. Obviously, they haven't said that, but we believe in the back of our minds there's some flexibility in the schedule and they could move the games around. But I think the bigger point here is, man, like, let's say, I'm totally with the NFL players or the NBA players or whoever wants to boycott or protest in whatever way they want to protest. That's fine. I get that, man. But I think there's got to be a bigger plan here. There's got to be some sort of substance to the boycott. There's got to be, essentially some wants and specific demands out of a boycott. The Bucks, in my eyes, jumped the gun, right? And they forced the hand of the NBA and other teams to boycott as well, because from all the reports coming out, it seems like Chris Paul and LeBron James and the NBA were formulating a plan for a league-wide boycott after the James Blake shooting, and looks like the Milwaukee Bucks jumped that and essentially, forced the hand of everybody else. In regards to how LeBron James and Chris Paul were doing it, they actually had a specific set of demands that they were going to ask for. So if you look at that, the situation that happened with the NBA, because, they essentially boycotted for 2 nights and they're back tomorrow night. And the question needs to be asked, what did they really accomplish, right? Sure, they got the nation's eyes on them, and that's totally fine. And the more attention you're going to throw at the situation, the more, the better it'll do in the long term. But how much more attention can you put on this issue? Like, I mean, you had the world was your captive audience when, essentially George Floyd was murdered, because nothing else was going down in the quarantine times. But I think what you really need to do is figure out, if you're going to boycott, then what are your demands, and when will you come back, when those demands are met or not,
Right. And I think the issue too with the Bucks, they were also the first game of the playoff slate on Monday. But I know there was also reports coming out that, a couple of people, I think Woj and some other folks for other outlets, were saying that the season's in jeopardy. And I know it was starting to get leaked out that Kawhi Leonard and LeBron James, they were really in the camp of not continuing the playoff and just calling the NBA season a wash, and everybody else decided to play. And I think, the former President Obama, he was involved in talks between the players and the owners, and Michael Jordan might have been in there. What my main takeaway is, you can look at social media with LeBron James, and he's got 70 million followers on Instagram and another 20 on Twitter and all this other stuff. Like, if he really wanted to make an impact and drive change, do you think the playoffs would really continue if the face of the league wasn't involved? Like, if he just said, I'm taking my ball and I'm going home because of this, and I'm going to fly to Wisconsin, I'm going to go to the State House in Madison, or I'm going to go to Kenosha, whatever the hell the name of the
Kenosha, Wisconsin
town is. Yeah. And go there and march with people, that would have been a bigger catalyst of change than just saying, all right, we're going to sit out for 2 games and we'll pick this back up on Saturday.
But I mean, going back to how LeBron James Instagram thing, if he really wanted to, man, he could do a live stream or a live Instagram story, whatever they call it, and he'd have 71 million people watching this stream. You know what I'm saying? He has such a big platform wherever he goes that he can make change. Now, I think the bubble itself provides a platform as well, because the whole nation's watching NBA basketball right now. Nothing else is, compelling enough. It's playoff basketball in the NBA. I mean, there's some great games. I myself, not being the biggest NBA fan, was even watching some of these games. I was, taken aback by Luka Doncic and how well he's playing, and I was enthralled in Dame time and all that stuff. Or let me back up, or lame time, as I call him.
All right, okay, Skip.
But essentially, exactly right. But essentially, there's some great games and the nation's watching, and you have this platform. Use it, man. I think what the NBA did, and I hope the NFL players are watching. When you do decide to boycott, we're not saying don't boycott. I'm not saying that. Do whatever you gotta do, brother, man. If you feel like you gotta do that, then I'm here to support you. But make something valuable out of this, right? At the end of the day, the NBA boycotted for 2 nights, and they, in my eyes, accomplished nothing really. They're back tomorrow night, right? Sure, they had some calls with some legislature groups. They demanded Wisconsin, with the equivalent of Wisconsin Congress, to come back.
Oh yeah, they were talking to the lieutenant governor and the district attorney.
But I bet you every single one of those lawmakers saw that and just laughed. I mean, why would they care if the NBA stopped? In their minds, they got to do it a different way. The NBA has to go to the owners, or go to the Milwaukee Bucks owner, who has some deep ties with those lawmakers, and kind of force it that way, or say you're moving the team out of Milwaukee, whatever you want to do. Essentially, have a game plan. And the NFL, I hope, is watching and listening and figuring out the game plan that they can formulate when this thing comes around during the fall. Because if there's one thing that we know, there's going to be another murder, and it's going to be on TV, on social media somewhere, and we're going to see it. It's going to come up again. Unfortunately, it's the situation we live in.
Yep.
So, we'll just see how it pans out.
Yep, exactly. In 2020 until all bets are off.
Yeah. So over under on the amount of games that will be affected by both COVID and social justice boycotting.
Oh God, we're factoring in COVID,
Yep.
huh? Let's see. What are we putting the over under at? 3.5.
I'll I think 3.5 is high. Let's do 2.5.
All right, 2.5. I'm gonna go. Let's see. I'm gonna go with maybe. Oh God, three
So
games.
yeah, so why you decide? I mean, I'm gonna go with 2 games. I'm gonna go with the under because I think it's definitely gonna happen once. Like somebody is gonna make a statement of social, boycotting or injustice, right? So it's definitely gonna
Yeah,
happen. And the odds say that there's gonna be another shooting and it's gonna be broadcast throughout the whole world. Unfortunately, I think that's definitely going to happen. But I think the COVID part of it, I think they have a good enough hand with the COVID that it's not going to affect it. I think it's just going to be a social justice boycott, 1, maybe 2 games max.
I think the opposite. I think there are going to be players that sit out. And I know that there's been a lot of positive news coming out of the NFL for testing. And I mean, I don't even think there was anybody added or removed from the COVID reserve list today, which is great to have everyday testing. And it seems like everybody's doing what they're told. But I was saying this to you weeks before we started recording today that like I want to see what happens when they start traveling. I think there's going to be more games missed because of COVID than than the social injustice, boycotting. I just think that what's going to happen if an entire offensive line gets ravaged with this. And I hope I'm wrong. I'm not rooting against sports happening. I just feel like in this day and age, and we're also going into flu season as well too, that there's a higher probability of games being missed because of this COVID issue than the social injustice factor.
Yeah.
But I'm
Well,
definitely with you. I mean, we're 2 weeks away from kickoff. Everything in this country is a powder keg at this point. It's just going to take one other instance going on in this country to put everything on tilt. And if that happens, I mean, we might not have sports. I mean, there were a lot of people reporting that across other leagues like Major League Soccer to football at some point of canceling seasons was an option on the table. It's the nuclear option, but it was still there
no, it's
regardless.
it's not the nuclear option. It's the first option for some fucking reason. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've never in my life been in a spot where the NFL is like actively trying to make it work, and there's so much resistance, man. There's whether it's the COVID-19 thing or the social injustice. Like, I just feel the NFL is not supposed to happen this year. Like, it just seems like it's not in the cards.
Mm-hmm.
It should be easier than this. It really should be. Like every time you turn around, there's like this threat on TV. Oh, there's gonna be no season. Oh, there's no season. Like it's just absolutely insane this year, man. And I'm just ready for 2021. Is all I can say.
Yep. Just punt it. Punt it.
Okay, cool. So that'll be a storyline we'll kind of keep an eye on as the season progresses, and we'll give you guys updates. Now, moving on to some actual football, let's start with the Patriots training camp update. Me being the resident Patriots fan, it's going to be an interesting year this year. Like I said earlier, I don't think we're going to win the division. This team, top to bottom, is not the best talent-wise, but they might pleasantly surprise me. So we'll see what happens. But give you guys a quick update on training camp. I've been kind of plugging my ear into the local beat reporters up there every single day and listen to all the podcasts and the information coming out of training camp. Essentially, I'm going to break this down into, segments for you guys. The good, which is very few, and the bad, which there's quite a lot of.
It's
But
fine. You got
I
Damon
did,
Harris in the soft hands.
well, what I did was I just picked 3 good and 3 bad just because I could sit here and spout off 19 different bads and we'll just take 3 hours of your time. But here's the good. I do believe that Damian Harris seems to be flourishing as a running back for the New England Patriots. I would not be shocked with the lack of production from Sony Michel and the injury factor of Sony Michel that Damian Harris is going to be our lead back for this year. Now it's always hard to pick out running backs that Belichick is going to lean on because it's like every single week it changes. But the fact that Damian Harris sat out last year, he seems like he's fairly healthy. He was very explosive back in Alabama and college. And looks like he has fresh legs. I do believe Damian Harris is going to be a running back to keep your eye on. The next thing I want to point out, which is kind of in tandem with Damian Harris, is Isaiah Wynn. Isaiah Wynn was the offensive tackle we took in the first round, I think a couple of years ago or last year. I forget what year it is now.
I think it was 2
Um,
years ago.
yeah, it's 2 years ago, and he's been plagued with injuries for 2 years straight now, and he hasn't really been able to perform. But from all indications coming out of camp, Isaiah Wynn is an absolute stud. He's holding the offensive line down. He's opened up holes for Damian Harris. So I'm really excited about Isaiah Wynn. The third and final good for my end for the Patriots is going to be the secondary. They're having a great camp, but then again, I expect them to have a great camp. I mean, when you have Stephon Gilmore and the McCourty twins and the veteran secondary that we have, I'm pleasantly surprised at the camp that the secondary is having. Now the bad. This is where it gets interesting. Um, I think the front seven on defense is having a really, really hard time, man. And I think looking back, it's kind of expected because we have so many new faces on defense. The fact that Kyle Van Noy and, who's the other guy that fucking left? Hightower is not playing this year because of the COVID. And I forget the guy that left as well. But
Jamie
essentially,
Collins, he went to Detroit.
yeah, exactly. That's what we're looking for, right? It's a rash of people leaving and people opting out, and all these fresh faces coming in, like the Chase Winoviches and the Uches from Michigan. That all reports coming out of camp are indicating that the front seven just cannot get any pressure on the quarterback. They can't hold the line. One of the reasons why the running game and Isaiah Wynn are having such a great, camp is because they're just pushing that front seven around like it's nothing. So that's going to be kind of an interesting to watch an eye on. The second thing that I'm looking at is the wide receiver group, and from all indications, it's essentially Julian Edelman, and everybody else is trash. Looks like the wide receiver group is fairly bad. It might be the worst, worst team group on our whole team. So, from what I understand, Gunnar Osefsky, which was an undrafted wide receiver from last year, is our second best wide receiver, and that's a great story. Undrafted receiver being the second best wide receiver after Julian Edelman, but on the other end, that means the rest of your wide receivers are trash. I mean, N'Keal Harry, he'll have like 3 or 4 good catches or one good practice, and it'll be reported. But for the most part, N'Keal Harry has been trash. The tight ends themselves, there's nothing great to write about the tight end group as well. So in general, I think the wide receivers are gonna have a tough time this year. But that is one of the reasons why I believe the quarterback situation is in dire situation as well. When you have a quarterback battle and you have Tom Brady leaving from your team and you have to find a new quarterback, having a great wide receiver group can help you out quite a bit. But everybody knows by now that it's a 2-horse race between Cam Newton and Jarrett Stidham. And from all indications over the last, I would say, 3 or 4 days, it seems that Cam Newton is starting to edge himself a little bit over Jarrett Stidham. From what I understand, Jarrett Stidham had a hip injury and he couldn't really perform in practice, and they had to kind of pull back his reps, which allowed Cam Newton to kind of jump in and take some of the stronghold on the competition. Now, from what I understand, it's still a quarterback competition, but Cam Newton seems to be day by day getting more comfortable in the system and taking the mantle and running with it.
Yeah, for sure, especially like the quarterback aspect. I mean, even like up till, last week, when Brian Hoyer was air quote like in the running for reps. Nobody really took over, a stranglehold on the job, and I think this is the opportunity for Cam to really secure himself as quarterback one up in Foxborough. It's good. Is Sanu still on the PUP list, or did he come off?
Sanu was on a PUP list for most of camp. He came off, I believe, about 5 days ago.
Okay.
He's working himself back into shape. But I don't see anything out of Sanu as well. I mean, I've watched all the footage and heard all the reports coming out. He's not sparking or, getting any separation at all as well.
Yeah. Yeah, really, I feel like this is just going to be a run-heavy team just based on the moves that they made in the offseason and in the draft with, there's a lot of positive reports coming out of camp for Harris, and it sounds like he could possibly be more involved in the passing game than originally expected. And at this point, what you're getting out of Sony Michel. I mean, he had a hell of a playoff run and Super Bowl run 2 years ago, but he just can't seem to get any consistency together, and often injured. And there have been rumblings that he may be a roster bubble guy at this point. And, you're signing old man Lamar Miller, who, you can look at his numbers over his career. He's pretty consistent in what he offers in both the running game and the passing game. So it's going to be fun to see how they weave this offense in there. Get ready for the Tums. That's all I'm going to say. I got Tums at the house. I know I'm going to be needing Tums at points for this season as well, too. So we can split it. We can do joint custody of the Tums rations around here.
That's gonna be wonderful, man. And I think you're spot on right with the fact that Damian Harris is emerging. I do believe that Sony Michel is gonna get cut. I would be shocked if he makes the roster because he's been inconsistent. He's had history with fumbling. On top of that, J.J. Taylor is an undrafted rookie that's kind of showing out in camp right now.
Right, and you got Rex Burkhead back there, too.
Rex
like,
Burkhead, Damian Harris,
carries you have to go around?
James White, Lamar Miller. I truly do believe Sony Michel is on the bubble. And you know what? Great. Fuck him. I'm sick and tired of Sony Michel. I am so angry with who he is and who he's become. We thought he was going to be the hot fucking running back for the next 10 years for us. We took him in the first round. We took him, I think he was in the same draft class as Nick Chubb and all those guys. So I'm done with him. I'm done with Sony Michel. Hopefully he fucking moves on and we're done with him.
Yep.
Looking at a 7-9 season. That's what I'm predicting.
It's fine. It's still going to be more wins than my Miami Dolphins. And speaking of my Miami Dolphins, I'm going to bring you guys down to South Beach and give you guys an update. And it actually sounds like somewhat positive reports coming out of camp on the defensive side of the ball as well as the offense. And a lot of this is centered around Tua Tagovailoa being the first round pick that we took out of Alabama this year. It seems like, according to all the beat writers down there, from what they can tweet out, because the NFL has put a lot of restrictions on what reporters can and cannot say on Twitter about practices, it seems like the consensus is that Fitzpatrick is going to be the opening day starter for the Dolphins, and I fully expected that. But it seems like Josh Rosen and Tua are locked in battle to be the backup quarterback, to be the second string guy, and obviously the loser would be the quarterback 3. And it seems like it was neck and neck. There was a point last week, I believe it was Friday, Fitzpatrick, he had to leave training camp to deal with the personal matters. So a lot of the number one reps were being split between Rosen and Tua. And nobody really took a stranglehold on that job or that performance. But day by day, you're hearing more reports of Tua getting a little bit more comfortable in the offense and stringing more practices together consistently in a positive manner. And the same thing with Josh Rosen. Josh Rosen has had a great camp as well. And even from an attitude perspective, one of the local beat reporters, Omar Kelly, who's one of the toughest guys. The only way I could describe him is Dan Shaughnessy, the Dan Shaughnessy version of a Dolphins beat reporter for the Miami Sun-Sentinel, I believe. And I mean, he was amazed at the attitude adjustment that Josh Rosen has had, and he's not demanding a trade. He wants to stick around. He wants to learn under Fitzpatrick, and whenever his number gets called, he wants to be ready. For me, on the offensive side of the ball, I'm more interested in the wide receiver competition or the depth, I should say. I mean, Devontae Parker had a breakout season last year, but Preston Williams, he is one of my guys that I think could be a breakout candidate in the NFL this year. He was stringing together a bunch of positive performances last year until he had an ACL injury that shut him down for the remainder of the year. But I mean, this guy is talented coming out of Colorado State last year. He went undrafted, not because of his talent, but because of some off the field issues. And really, he was taking a majority of the work away from Devontae Parker last year until he got hurt. And then obviously Devontae ran off to the races, and anybody that had him on a fantasy team were most of the time, if anything, they were in the championship because of Devontae Parker. So it's going to be interesting to see how those reps shake out. Is he going to cement himself as the clear number one moving forward? And Mike Gesicki, the tight end, I think he was out of Penn State a couple of years ago. He's finally starting to come along. He had a great end of the season last year, and he seems to be stringing that together in camp as well, too. So I'm excited for the offensive side of the ball. We have a couple of running backs that may be able to actually lead the team in rushing. Ryan Fitzpatrick led the team last year with 200 rushing yards total last season. So I'm excited to see what Jordan Howard and Matt Breida can bring to the table.
So, if you had to guess right now, who's the number 1, 2, and 3 quarterbacks coming out of camp for the Dolphins?
Oh God, Fitz. Number 2 is too close to call.
So there's no way Tua starting, right?
I don't think he's starting week 1. He's probably going to start after maybe week 6, depending on how the season shakes out. I mean, Fitz gives them the best chance to win. If you had to hold a gun, I don't know, man, because like nobody has really cemented themselves as like the guy to be quarterback 2 down there. That's a coin toss. I mean, you can flip a coin. That's going to be my cop-out answer is flip a coin right now. We'll call heads Rosen. We'll call tails Tua. And whatever that response is, 2 out of 3, that's the guy that's going to be quarterback 2.
Interesting. Okay, well, that's good to know. Well, listen, we're only, 2 weeks away from Patriots versus Dolphins, 1 p.m., kickoff of the season. Are you excited for that, bro?
Oh, yes, it's going to be something to watch, and I'm actually off that day. So
we getting together watching the football, huh?
That is the plan. That is the plan.
My man. I'll get the red zone fired up. We'll have 2 TVs. We'll have the Patriots and Dolphins on one, and then we'll have the red zone on the second TV.
It's gonna be a good day. It's gonna be a good day.
All right, man. That looks that's great. Next up, we're gonna talk about the Washington football team, and I'm gonna try my hardest to not say Redskins, but I probably will.
I think we need to have an R word jar. So anytime you get a free pass on this one, but anytime somebody says the old team name, we have to put like 25 cents in a jar.
Well, listen, man, there's quite a bit happening in Washington, and these storylines coming out are alarming / sad. But essentially, and I'll turn the floor over to you because you have a full grasp of what's going on down there. But, it started with Ron Rivera and his diagnosis that he had cancer, right?
That's the cherry on the cake.
Exactly, right?
That's the cherry on the cake.
Yeah. But the bigger issue is Washington Post. I feel like the Washington Post has like a mole on the inside that they're just working with. But they seem to drop more and more horrific stories coming out of the Washington football team and Dan Snyder making him look really bad, that it's gotten so bad that the NFL has started an independent investigation as well. So I'll turn the floor over to you, man. Give the people a rundown of what's going on, then we'll kind of react.
All right. So really what happened in the course of the month or 2 that we've been off because of, everything that's been going on in the world, there was a report that came out. Well, even before then, let me rewind the clock more. There was a giant push, I want to say early June, of a couple of Wall Street hedge fund investors going to the companies that they have holdings in, like Pepsi and FedEx and all this other stuff, that they said that if they don't separate themselves from the Washington football team, they're going to pull their money out of these firms. Well, that caused the minority owner of the Washington football team, who is also the president and CEO of FedEx, who also owns the naming rights to the home stadium that they play in Loudoun County, Virginia, FedEx, that they said if they don't change the team name, that they're going to, they're basically going to remove their name from the stadium. They'll void their naming rights deal that's been in effect for the last 22 or so years. And that really got the ball rolling. And then the next day, Ron Rivera and Dan Snyder came out and said that they're going to reevaluate things. They're going to look at all avenues of change. And if they decide to change the name, it's going to honor, the pride of the city, the military, and all this other stuff. So that was the tip of the iceberg. But really what drove the screws, the iceberg that hit the Titanic in the Washington football team, was there was a Washington Post article about sexual harassment and misconduct in the workplace between higher-ups in the team, from the scouting office to I think it was Larry Michael. He was the lead broadcaster for the radio broadcast, harassing women in the workplace and making sexually suggestive comments and unwanted passes and everything. So they got fired or forced into early retirement. In the case of Larry Michael, they bring in this new staff to take over the roles, and they're going to drive change. And they hire the first African American president for a team in NFL history. His name is escaping me, but he made history
Jason
about
Wright?
3 weeks ago. Yeah, Jason Wright. So he's the first African American to hold the president position of any NFL team. And then about 48 to 72 hours ago, another Washington Post article came out alleging that Daniel Snyder, the owner of the team, was more involved in, sexually harassing employees, making passes at them, having a video made and handed out to, senior members of the team and other people involved in season ticket sales and big spenders. And the Washington Post article really buried Dan Snyder. And in the wake of the first article that came out, they hired a former federal prosecutor to conduct their own internal investigation. And at the time, it raised a lot of eyebrows because that's essentially the fox guarding the henhouse. Well, with this latest Washington Post article alleging Daniel Snyder being involved himself, the league finally had to step in and say, we're conducting our own independent investigation alongside with whatever investigation the Washington football team is doing. And that's all happening while Coach Ron Rivera comes out and says that he's been diagnosed with a form of lymph node cancer. And he may miss a couple of games this year. And Jack Del Rio may be the interim head coach. And it is just a goddamn mess down in the District of Columbia right now.
Yeah.
However this plays out, Ron Rivera should be nominated for sainthood. He should get a presidency somewhere. He should get coach of the year because everything that's going on, he's been the one steady voice going on in the district right now.
Listen, and the worst part about this whole thing is, man, the Washington football team does have a good football team in my eyes. Now, it's not going to be like, when I say good football team, I mostly mean the defense. I think that defense is gonna be lights out. It has a chance to be a top 10 defense. When you add Chase Young to Ryan Kerrigan and all those boys on the defense, I mean that is gonna be just something spectacular to watch. And in this league, we know if you can play good defense and run the ball, there's a good chance you can win games, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with all this bullshit coming out, it begs the question: just how distracted will the Washington football team be?
Right? We missed the Darius Geis getting released.
I mean that's a small thing.
Battery.
Yeah, that's a small thing compared to everything else going on. You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to make light of domestic battery because it's a horrific, charge. But there's so much going on, so much fucked up shit going on in the Washington football team that is barely making the news. And I think the worst out of all of it was the fact that Dan Snyder himself seems to enable this environment of sexual harassment where he's passing out videos and I think the one that got me the most was that lewd video. That one was the one that I was like,
the Costa Rica photo shoot.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, like how creepy is that, right? So I think the NFL really needs to take a hard look at Daniel Snyder and who he is. I do believe that they should force him to sell the team. I mean, I think there's so much fire here that it's painting the NFL in a bad light. And if you're really in the, making sure everybody is equal and there's justice for all in that business, NFL, then you really need to look really hard at Daniel Snyder and who he is as a person.
Yeah, and it's funny because earlier in the day, I think it was Monday or Tuesday, when the Washington Post article came out alleging Daniel Snyder's direct involvement, he released a statement through his attorney, and long story short, they called it a Washington Post hit job, and these allegations are unfounded, and basically we'll have our day in court, yada yada yada. Well, fast forward 6 hours later, the Washington football team releases their own statement, basically whitewashing everything that Dan Snyder's original statement said, and said that anybody that felt like they were, not slighted, but a victim of some of these allegations themselves, that they should come forward and discuss these options. You don't have to worry about your non-disclosure agreements or whatever. In order to facilitate change, we need to hear all of these allegations in order for us to move forward, kind of deal. And when I saw that statement, I was like, the truth is somewhere in between. Like, maybe he didn't do all of these things, but he did enough that they had to release a separate statement from the owner of the team saying everybody that was, that was involved or felt like they were a victim needs to come forward now.
Yeah. And I think the person that this sucks the most for all this, like, instability in the organization is my boy Dwayne Haskins, the sophomore quarterback for the Washington Redskins, or I'm sorry, the Washington football team.
Yep, 25 cents.
Essentially, he was supposed to take that next leap this year. And, by all indication this offseason, he was, putting in the work and trimming up and learning the playbook, man. Like the guy is, putting the work in, and all the videos and the stuff you see out of camp show him, having a great camp with Terry McLaurin, right? And on top of that defense is so good. I truly believe this team had the potential to be, not like a playoff team, but I think they could have made some noise in the NFC. But I think with everything going on and all the distractions and the fact that your top-down leadership is crap, I mean, we're looking at maybe a 2, maybe a 3-win team at the most. I mean, depending on how bad it gets. I have no faith in what the Washington football team is doing right now, man.
You know what? For the football aspect, X's and O's kind of deal, I think if everything kind of lines up from a football standpoint, because there's been nothing but good reports coming out about Terry McLaurin, and like you said, Dwayne Haskins has really cut down on the weight. His attitude is in the right place right now. You have Alex Smith coming back, and it sounds like it may be a quasi quarterback competition. And even if he doesn't win the job, I don't expect him to win the job. Just to have a veteran presence in that locker room day in and day out to help out with Dwayne. Understand that, life in the NFL is going to be great. The defense is stacked with Chase Young, even though he was dinged up a little bit. But, there's been a lot of reports coming out of, Bryce Love having a couple of good runs with the running back 1 reps. And Antonio Gibson is getting used a little bit more in the running back depth chart because of, Darius Geis getting released. I think, especially if they're with the expanded playoff field, I mean, hell, this team, for how bad they were last year, they were still in the running to win the NFC East last year. If they're able to string some things together, and hell, when Jack Del Rio was the interim head coach for the Denver Broncos a few years ago, he put together an 8-win team with the squad that was of lesser talent. I think they could be a fringe playoff team, but everything needs to kind of line up. And it's 2020, and it's COVID, and it's social unrest. And that is not beyond the realm of possibility either.
Well, let's do this. Let's do everybody's favorite game. Let's pull up the Washington football team schedule, and let's do the win-loss game. Sitting here in, late August, and we're going to pretend like we're going to know how all these games pan out. So let's do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Week 1, you got the Eagles traveling to Washington. I don't think the Washington Redskins are going to win this game. I give them a loss here.
You know what? I'm going to go off the reservation. I'm going to say a win only because Andre Dillard for the Eagles went down yesterday with a torn bicep, I believe. He's going to be done for the season. They're going to move Jason Peters back inside. They still have to fill that void a little bit on the offensive line. From how Chase Young sounds at camp, I think he's going to maul some people. I'm going to go off reservation. Washington Redskins, give me 25 cents. The football team is going to win on September 13th.
The football team is going to win September 13th. All right, just keep track of your wins. We'll put the losses in at the end.
Yep.
So you got 1 win right now.
Yep.
Next week, Washington traveling across country to the Cardinals. By all accounts, the Cardinals are going to be a great team this year. I give them a loss here.
I'll give them a loss too.
Washington goes to the Browns. That's a loss in my book.
Yeah, I'll buy that.
Ravens versus Washington, loss.
Yeah.
Did you really just that one?
Yeah, a little bit. Dude, because that front 4, man, like they could get after it.
Yeah, well, listen,
I mean, hell, like the
Cleveland
Browns, that defense gave Lamar Jackson a run for his money. I think they actually split the season series last year with all the dysfunction that the Browns had.
LA Rams versus Washington.
You know what? Give me a win.
This is a loss as well in my book. Next week, I'm going to give him the first win, and it's going to be Washington versus the Giants. I'm going to give Giants win here. I'm going to give the Washington Redskins a win here.
Oh, no, 25 cents.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm gonna give Washington a win here as well too. They're gonna go to the Meadowlands and sneak away with the victory. So they're on a 2-game winning streak with me right now.
So you got them at 3 wins so far. I got them at 1 win so far.
Yeah, I'm at 3-3. They're at 500.
Wow. All right, I got the Cowboys versus Washington. Since the fact that this is in Washington, I'll give the Washington football team a win here. So I got 2 wins there.
I'm gonna give them. I'll give Washington a loss here. Win streak gets snapped.
Giants versus the Washington football team again. I'll give the Giants the win this time.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the sweep. I think Washington's gonna win this one at home.
Washington versus the Lions. I do believe the Lions are going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. I'll give Washington the win here.
Likewise.
Bengals versus Washington. I'll give the Bengals the win here.
I'll go the opposite. I'll go Washington with the W.
Washington versus Cowboys. I already gave the Cowboys a loss to Washington earlier in the year. I don't think they'll sweep them, so the Cowboys get the win back here.
This is Turkey Day too, right?
Yep.
11-26. You know what? They're gonna win in Big D. They're gonna win in Jerry World.
Washington versus the Steelers. We all think the Steelers are going to be one of those teams that's going to surprise a lot of people. Big Ben's coming back healthy. He's got his arm intact. He's, had the come to Jesus moment. He's not addicted to porn and alcohol anymore. I think he is going to win this game. Do you remember that story?
Yep.
This has been so crazy. I just get swept under the rug,
Yep. No, I'm with you on the loss too.
Next week, Washington versus 49ers. I'm going to give Washington the win here.
Really?
I just hate the 49ers, you know that. So it's 4 wins. And then Seattle versus Washington. That's a loss in my book for the Washington football team.
Their offensive line is still a little rough up in Seattle. I'm going to give them a win. They're gonna win at home against the 12th man.
Panthers versus Washington. I will give them their final and 5th win of the season here.
I'll go with a win as well.
And then the final game is Washington versus Eagles. I'm going to go ahead and have the Eagles win this game as well, meaning I have 5 wins, which puts them at 5-11 this year.
I'm going to go with a loss here, especially in Philly. So I'm at 5, 6, 8, 8-7.
You have them at 8. That makes no sense. It has to be 8-8, right?
Wait, what am I? 5.
Because if you go off the wins, it's 8 wins, 8 losses.
Am I at 9?
Well,
that's not they're a 9-win team.
You got them at a 9-win team. You've got them at a 9-win team.
Yeah, I had them sweeping Dallas. So
that's with the extra playoff spot. That's a playoff team.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
You heard it here first. Another one of those patented the Puma, conspiracy crazy.
Going off the reservation. I don't know, man. Say what you want. A lot of these teams that they're facing. I'm in the camp that the Bengals are going to have an improved squad, but that's also assuming that Jonah Williams is going to be able to come out and immediately fill that role that he was drafted in last year as a first-round pick out of Alabama. I think he can, but if he's going against a guy like Chase Young is the X factor of this defense. I mean, they've been dropping him in coverage. They've been having him get after the quarterback. He can do, and this, you've seen him, he can do everything. And there's a bunch of former first-round picks on that defensive line. I think that if, some of these teams like the Bengals, like the Seattle Seahawks, they're going to have Russell Wilson running for their life. And especially early on in the season, there's no actual preseason games. Jordan Palmer, he's a quarterback coach for a couple of people like Sam Darnold and Josh Allen and whatnot. A couple of weeks ago with Albert Breer, he came out and said that the first couple of weeks, the offensive line play is going to be bad. The quarterbacks are going to be running for their life. That plays into the strength of this Washington football team, especially with the Jack Del Rio coach defense. I think this line is going to surprise some people.
Yeah, listen, that's not the debate here. I think that defensive line is going to be probably a top 10, defensive line unit in the NFL. I had the chance of seeing Chase Young play in person last year at the Ohio State Michigan game, and he is so big and he's so physical and he is just unbelievable, man. Like, you remember that meme of Derrick Henry standing next to Mark Ingram? You remember that?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's how Chase Young made other elite talent on that field look like in person, man. Like, I saw him standing next to a tight end, and the tight end looked small. So I mean, the guy is absolutely phenomenal. You've seen those Washington Redskin video content coming out showing him just manhandling offensive linemen. So it's just the rest of the stuff that I'm worried about. It's the rest of the distractions and this and that, and how is Dwayne Haskins going to progress in year two. So I don't know. We will see. I think 9-7 is a little ambitious for me, but I think between 5 and 6 wins is probably where I see it.
Yeah. You know what? Terry McLaurin, F1 McLaurin, Scary Terry, whatever your nickname is for him. I think he has the potential to be. Man, I think he could be a top 15 wide receiver, borderline top 10 kind of guy. I mean, everything with he was dealing with last year, and he's a savage, man. He
came out of nowhere too, man. Like
he was a third round pick.
He has good skills, and I watched him at Ohio State, and I know of his ability. I just didn't think he was going to be this good, man. Listen, this is the one fantasy thing nugget I'll drop real quick. A sleeper that you want to pick up as late as possible if he's still available. Pick up Paris Campbell, the former Ohio State wide receiver currently playing for the Indianapolis Colts. The guy made Terry McLaurin look slow. Like Paris Campbell has unbelievable speed. We're talking like maybe 4.2 in the grand scheme of things. But he is going to make some plays this year. He's had a year to learn that system. He is going to
up last year too. He really didn't have much of a chance.
Yeah. So Paris Campbell is somebody you want to keep an eye on, man. But these Ohio State receivers, man, they're making themselves a name in the NFL.
For sure.
All right, man. Well, that is all I really got to get to. What do you want to get to?
That's really it, man. It's just 2 weeks from tonight, we'll be watching Texans Chiefs in Arrowhead with like 22% of the fan capacity.
2 weeks from last night.
What's up?
2 weeks from last night.
Last night? Oh, today's Friday. Yep. So 13 days till kickoff. Yep, it's gonna be a fun time.
I've already got a Ashton stogie picked out for that evening.
Awesome. I love it. It's gonna be a good time.
So if me and the Puma have found a new hobby, which is essentially being two hillbillies and smoking cigars on his front porch and watching the world go by.
I mean, I'm the hillbilly. You're the sophisticated gentleman on the front porch.
But essentially, we have. I mean, I've actually grown to love smoking a cigar, man. I don't know how you feel about it, but it's like a new hobby of mine. And if anybody is looking for a good quality brand, the Ashton cigar brand is a great one. Every single time I've gotten it for Puma and myself, it's been great. We started out with the Ashton, I believe, Symmetries was the name of it, right?
Yeah.
And then we moved over to the Aston Winston Churchills. And if you're named after Winston Churchill, it better be damn good. But, we actually enjoyed the hell out of that cigar. So I got a good one picked out for Thursday night, bro, for opening night.
Yes, sir. And for those of you guys in the New Haven area, you can also find these cigars at the Owl Shop. They are open. I think what are they at, Jay? Like 50% capacity indoors? They have outdoor seating?
Yeah, it's all reserved seating. When I was down there with my brother a few weeks ago, maybe like 5-6 weeks ago, essentially you had to roll up and make a reservation, and it was like limited capacity, and but they're still open. They're available. They're open for you guys.
It is worth the hoops that you have to jump through to get in there.
All right, man. Sounds good. Well, you want to plug it up real quick?
Yeah. So you can find this episode and previous episodes of the Pro Football Radio podcast on SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Play or Google Podcast, wherever the hell it is now, Stitcher, and I believe this is going to go up on YouTube as well, too. You can find us on social media, Facebook and Instagram, Pro Football Radio Podcast, Twitter at PFR Podcast. I'm on Twitter at Brando_Puma. My compadre, my brother in arms, Jay Cheema, is at Jay Cheema. Like, subscribe, download. Our DMs are open. If you have any questions you want us to answer on the air, just hit us up. We want to make this show more tailored towards you guys, and we're going to have a lot of things to discuss now that the NFL season is right around the corner, and we'd love to get your input. And again, Jay opened the show up. Again, this show is for our brother Nicholas Porter. Love you, man. Miss you. And yeah, this one's for you.
Yep, that's the way we put it, man. Nicholas was a great dude. He's my brother. I love him, miss him, and he's in a better spot now, man.
Yes, sir. And it's been a while for this one as well, too. Freddie Soliotis, you're fired!
All right, well, that's always good. It always hits hard. And with that, we will see you guys next time.
Via con Dio!